Good evening, everybody. I hope you've been able to join us on the call this evening. And we are here sitting in the leader's office at the town hall, and we're going to be going through a number of questions with you tonight. I'm Julian Ellaby. I'm the Corporate Director of Strategy, and I'll be hosting the event and therefore taking your questions as they come in. What I'm just going to do for 1 minute is set out how we want it to work. I'm going to introduce shortly the leader. Everybody. I hope you've been able to join us on the call this evening. And so I'm going to introduce, sorry, just a bit of feedback there. So I'm going to introduce the leader and then the borough commander. We've got about an hour, and we're going to take as many questions as we can, but we're going to do a little bit of intro firstly. What I was going to say is that if we don't answer all your questions straight away, we will be doing written answers afterwards, and there will be a recording of the event as well. So let's move on as quickly as we can. I'm going to hand over to yourself, leader. So Councillor Camry, over to you.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. And thank you for dialing in. I'm really looking forward to taking some of your questions today, talking more about what the council can do and what the police can do, and how our residents, all of us, all three of us, can help to keep Redbridge safe. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Chief Inspector Stuart Bell, our East Area Commander, who is joining me today in answering your questions tonight. Chief Inspector Bell brings valuable expertise and insight into policing matters across our borough. Stuart and I meet every month, and Councillor Chowdhury, the Cabinet lead, meets every week with the police. But we felt it was the right time to also ensure that we can meet with local people regularly as well and answer your questions. We've set aside the next hour to hear your questions and concerns, whether you're interested in local policing, community safety, or antisocial behaviour. And we're here to listen and respond. Feel free to put a question into the Q&A in the top right, and we will do our best to get them all answered today in the time we have. We'll also be recording and post this session on our website in the coming days. Any questions that we do not get to, we'll do our best to respond to and put online. So, Stuart, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Cam. Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Stuart Bell. I'm Chief Superintendent in the Met, and my role is BCU Commander, and that entails overseeing local policing in 3 London boroughs. So Redbridge, Barking, Dagenham, and Havering is my area that I am responsible for ensuring the delivery of all policing services in that part of London. And I've been doing that role since April 2022. In that time, I've spent a good amount of time and effort working in the borough of Redbridge for a number of reasons, many of which are positive in terms of working in partnership with locally elected leaders, and also working really closely with the local authority, where we have developed some ways of tackling crime and ASB that have been innovative and have helped us to address some of the issues that we think are concerning the community. But we know that there's a huge amount more to do. So part of my role is to open up policing to scrutiny and to answer questions about what we're doing. Hence, we're here tonight, and I'd like to thank the partners and also Cam for arranging this opportunity to discuss policing, crime and ASB and anything else in the local area.
So thank you, Stuart. What we're going to do now is we're going to put a slide on the screen, which I'm going to ask Stuart to talk to, just to explain some of the background and more detail to do with local stats and crime in the area. So I'm just going to confirm with colleagues that the slide is live, and it's just going up now. Yes, it's now on show. So it's over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Julian. So I'm going to talk through the slide quite briefly, because these statistics that you see on here are recorded crime. So something that does divide opinion and create quite a lot of comment when police talk about recorded crime. But absolutely, it's important that we're able to show what crimes are being reported to us, what crime types we're being told are happening, and accepting the fact that we do know that lots of crime types are underreported, and our role is to understand what people's experiences of crime and what people are worried about when it comes to crime. So these are hard statistics, but it would be remiss not to share them. What I would say is the way in which we measure progress is we look at a 12-month period and we compare it to the same area 12 months before, and those are what you see statistically laid out here. We also look at short-term crime trends. So how well are we doing in terms of crime reduction compared to sort of a 2-month period. So the previous month compared to the month before tends to be something that we look at. And of course, crime does change with the seasons. I think I'll start with a bit of a plea, actually, before I go into some of the headlines on the slide, which is we can only tackle crime if we know about it. And I do accept that there are some people that don't report crime for many reasons. It may be a whole host of reasons why somebody might not tell us that a crime has occurred. But even if we cannot solve every individual crime, making a record of incidents of note, making sure that we understand what crime is happening where, gives us the intelligence, the information to then launch policing operations which significantly improve our chances of catching criminals. So at the moment, there are a number of policing operations in Redbridge aimed at different crime types where we're seeing really successful results, people being arrested, property being recovered, knives being taken off the street. And to allow us to put resources into those operations, we need people to come forward and report crime. It's not a waste, even if we can't solve your individual crime. So the statistics that you see on the screen are a record of different crime types and how many reports have been made to us. You can see personal robbery, which has been a real concern for us in London and this part of London as well. We've done a lot of work to try to limit the incidents, particularly of young people falling victim of street robbery, where quite often violence or the threat of violence is used. And you can see that in this area, so in Redbridge, we have seen a significant reduction over the last year in reports of personal robbery, and it's a crime type that's quite reliable. The property that's taken does require people to report this to us. So we've put a lot of effort to target the offenders that we know are committing these crimes, sadly often young people, and we've seen a 30% reduction compared to the previous year, which equates to about 160 less victims. You can see that incidents of theft to person have increased in the past 12 months. We've done some operations to tackle that, where people are finding themselves victims of pickpocketing or other ways of stealing property off of your person that don't involve violence, normally stealth. And we've done some operations to tackle that, but we are aware the increase across London is quite significant in these crime types, but we have seen an increase, so we are aware of that. Knife crime is down slightly, an area of real concern for us, and we do knife crime operations in and around our hotspots, but we have seen a significant reduction in knife crime injuries as well. Violence is down 15%. Burglary is down 1.7%, and I would say it's probably at the lowest level that we've seen for such a very, very long period of time, if not ever, because we've seen 5 years of sustained reduction in terms of residential burglary. Theft of motor vehicles, such a concern locally, we know, for residents and communities. In this part of London, we have seen an 11% increase in that crime type. We've launched some policing operations that have looked to target the offenders of motor vehicle crime, and in this year alone, so already in early January, we've had some real successes, recovered stolen vehicles and made some significant arrests, which for me is the only way forward when it comes to motor vehicle crime. It may be that it comes up later as a question. And theft from motor vehicle is significantly reduced. So we've done a significant amount of work around crime prevention and how to actually stop yourself becoming a victim or a target for people that steal from cars, which is a pretty wide range of different crimes that occur. But essentially, it can be anything from catalytic converters being taken off the car, or actually the contents of the car being taken. And that equates to around about 460 less victims that we've seen as well. So there's the crime statistics for the borough. There's a load of other information that we could share, but I think probably this stage we'll pause and see what people's reflections are on that.
Okay, so thank you, Stuart, for that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to the questions. What I'm going to say to you before we get into them is that if you are asking questions, don't get into specific crimes or issues, because obviously we can't discuss them on this forum, but let's keep it in the broad. We will respond, as I said before, after the event, to make sure all the questions are answered. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is to yourself, Stuart. And I'm just repeating the question as it's coming in. There is a drug dealer on every corner. What can you do to stop this?
So we talk about underreported crime, and we know that drug dealing is really difficult to quantify in terms of crime statistics, but it is a problem, and it's one that we are aware of. And the issue. There's a number of issues here. One is we know it drives other crime types. So it's not just the drug dealing itself. It drives probably most of our theft offences, or a significant amount of theft, and any of the crime types that involve stealing property, or often to fuel drug habits. So it leads to other crime types, often in the areas where the drug dealers take place, and it also fuels violence, because we see a degree of violence that occurs where we have organised drug dealing. So it is something that we are acutely aware of. Our teams will do a range of things to tackle drug dealing. We do drug warrants. We've done a number of those over the past 12 months in this area, where identified drug dealing addresses are located. We also try to patrol those areas where we're being told there are specific drug dealing problems, like the town centre, which has been reported to us a number of times. And we have a dedicated team now working the town centre to try to have that visible deterrent, so that people are less likely to see it. And then at a more organised level, we are doing proactive operations. And I can't go into great detail on the call, but we do covert proactive operations to target drug dealers, not just those on the streets, but those that are fueling it through organised crime. And we've done a lot of activity in the past 12 months to tackle it, but it's not enough. We need some help around this, because the people who are buying the drugs are also fueling the trade. So for us, we need community support to make the buying of drugs and the use of drugs as abhorrent as other crime types. And I think we're far away from doing that at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. I just wanted to come to the leader on this one, because I think partnership working is pretty crucial on an issue like this, and more generally. Just wanted to get your take on that, leader.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I know that drug dealing and the perception of drug dealing as well is a major concern for everybody in the borough. Whenever I speak to a local residents, I'm hearing that from them. And I think there's a few things that I always say, and I know they've been successful, is if you can gather data carefully, if you can gather information carefully and give that to our partners in the police. It doesn't always happen straight away. I'll share my frustrations as well, because Stuart and I talk about this every month when we catch up. But it does usually lead to some form of action, whether it's picking up just more than the individual drug dealer, and actually the as Stuart was alluding to, looking at the whole group and trying to nab a group, I think, in a gang. But the information does work. When residents have given me information and then we've shared that with the police, I know of instances where it's resulted in arrests and it's resulted in removal of the drug dealing from that part of the borough. It's really important we all remain vigilant. I think the other part, I think Stuart touched on that as well, is that we know, the drug dealers are selling, unfortunately, to people locally as well. So I think all of us have a duty as well to make sure we report it when we see it or when we know about it. We can do it anonymously. We don't have to give out, and the police aren't going to share our details. It's important that we get that information over to the police, and then they have that information to work from.
I've got time to come back in on one more
Quick point, and then let's move on. Yeah.
We cannot police every street corner. We don't have the resources to do it. So the only way we can successfully tackle such endemic crime types is if people share information, as Cam says, so that we can then launch police operations where it's most prevalent. And we've done that in recent weeks in Ilford with a number of warrants and arrests. But we need that community intelligence and people to share that with us.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I'm going to come to you, leader, first, but this one talks about Ilford, but you might, when you're listening to this, might think about where you live and how this impacts on you locally. So I'd like to ask about shoplifting in Ilford. I rarely go in a shop where shoplifting isn't taking place. It must be putting off businesses coming here. It's not a specific question, but what can we do about it, and what is your observation about that, leader?
I think we have seen. I think we've all been on social media. We've all seen. If we haven't seen it there, we've seen it in person. Shoplifting does seem to have gone up a lot. The figures show that as well. And I think it's a big challenge for the retailers as well, as much as it is for the police, because it's about making sure that they can keep their staff safe and also have the place secure. Again, I think sometimes it comes back to when we're offered goods. When people are offered goods at a heavily discounted price, we have to ask the question, are we going to buy those goods and where have they come from? I think that's part of the equation, because these people are selling these goods on, they're shoplifting to usually sell them on at a discounted price. So I think it's important that we all take that responsibility as well around that and support our local businesses, because if we want our local businesses to thrive, then then we need to make sure we support them when they're shoplifted as well, and that those goods don't end up in our possession.
Stuart, what role would the police have with an issue like this?
So fundamentally, it's a crime, isn't it? And I think we absolutely have a duty to try and enforce that crime, but it is incredibly challenging because there's a number of things that we need to do across the partnership and potentially across this area and this particular crime type, and that is to make it harder to do and less attractive to do. And part of that is that CAM's plea to not buy goods if it's not from a credible source, because you're just fueling the trade. So make it harder to do and less lucrative and less easy. That's a dual responsibility. The prevention piece is a dual responsibility really for retailers and the police to work together. And we're working really closely in the business improvement district to listen to retailers and support that, make it less likely that it will happen.
Okay.
And there needs to be then the deterrent and the punishment for those that we do catch. And that for me is a wider political conversation about what and how this crime is dealt with through the judiciary.
Okay, so colleagues, you'll be hearing kind of a range of issues that the police and the council are trying to work on. Perhaps following up on that, Stuart, which is this notion of kind of seeing police on the streets, knowing all the demands you've got. So the question is, how can we see more police walking our streets? And also, what's really good is how can we get to know our police officers on a personal level?
Yeah.
What can we do?
So every single ward in Redbridge has a neighbourhood policing team with 2 constables and a PCSO in every ward. The town centre team has 25 officers working, not all at one time, but they work shifts so that we can get coverage and cover the mornings, the afternoons and the evenings. So we have officers out there. Any enforcement work that we do takes our officers off the street, and that is a reality of policing that's existed in the 28 years that I've been a police officer. If our officers make arrests, they're not visible. They'll be away, gone for several hours, and that's a fact. And we do make a lot of arrests. So our town centre team make a lot of arrests, dozens every month, doing proactive operations, undercover operations, those kind of things where we're doing police work, but we're not visible, all have to happen. Visibility alone doesn't deter crime. It makes people feel safe, but it doesn't deter criminals, and they will just work around that. So we look really closely at our abstraction rate from neighbourhood policing particularly. We've got ward panels in every single ward, which we would encourage people to take part in. So where you are in any ward in this borough, and we can put details on the published response about how to get involved in your ward panels, but they shape local policing. You have a conversation with your local police team and you help set those priorities. We've got that in every single ward, and if you want to take part, you can. We have lots of other places where you can meet your police team, and we try to advertise that and just say hello when you see our police officers.
So I just want to come in there. So Cam, we talk about police and we talk about police presence, but there is a role for the council here in having a presence on the streets as well. So could you just explain a bit more about how we fit into that in terms of what we put on the street as well?
Yeah, I mean, we work with Stuart's team closely. They meet every week, so we know and we try and pick up on where the hotspots are, where the problems are, what's been reported over the last week and the month, and that means that we can redirect our own resources, our community protection task force as well. They're not the police, but they are uniformed. They do have powers, and that includes being able to report things and working with our partners to get to reduce crime. So they're part of the solution, I think. The other part is that we've invested over the last few years, specifically on CCTV. So our ANPR cameras were put in, I think now 7 years ago, I believe. They're across our borough, so they read number plates as you're coming in and out of the borough. And I know that Stuart's team, the police, they've used the data from there to apprehend people, to see cars of notice coming in and out of the borough. So it's a really good way of monitoring who's coming in and out of our borough, be it a stolen vehicle coming in or a vehicle that's been involved in a crime. So there's a number of things that we do, I think, collectively to do that work. But I think ultimately it's still going to come down to everyone being involved, because we've got cameras, but the real eyes and ears are every one of the 300,000 people live in the borough, and everyone's got, everyone, but many of us have got CCTV, have got other forms of recording on our own properties that can help detect crime as well.
Yeah, even down to things like Ring doorbells.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to pick up on this thing about reporting, because we talk a lot about this. And the question here is, in South Woodford, we have a serious issue with car theft and graffiti. We do encourage reporting of crime, but we need to do more. how would you like us to report crime more? So, Stuart, I'm going to start with yourself because we talk about reporting, but what does a resident actually have to do to?
So it's easier than ever to report crime because it can be done online. So on the Met Police website, again, we can post details of this tomorrow, but you can make online reports of crime if you have access, and most people do now, to the ability to use a computer or a phone, and we can take online reports. So any crime type that you are a victim of, we want to hear about. We also have a way to report anonymous information through Crime Stoppers. And then the local mechanism for us would be, particularly for the lower level ASB stuff that perhaps you don't feel confident to report as a crime, but it's creating fear of crime, then I would encourage you to make contact with your local Safer Neighbourhood team, to engage with the ward panels, to contact your local police neighbourhood team. They all have an email address, they all have a contact number, and your local police team you can report that information directly to your local team, so they can then collate it and come up with a plan to actually resolve the issue.
That's really helpful. And I'm thinking about some of the initiatives that we might be trying to do in the council as well. We know that crime can be often just that low level stuff. So, Cam, I don't know what your thoughts on about how a resident might be able to report on perhaps some of the more that day-to-day stuff that kind of spoils an area where you live.
So we've got the Report It app, that's a Report It function on our website. And I think that there's also the app, Love Clean Streets. It's really easy to use. It allows you to report a variety of things, not just around cleansing, but a variety of different things that you can report, and you get updated straight away as well. So it's a really easy tool to use, and it allows you just within a moment or two to report an incident or an issue in your area, and it gets sent to the council, and the council will then send you an email response telling you what they've done with it as well. So there are avenues around doing that work as well.
But there's also the collaboration between the council and the police is really strong. So we have a problem-solving group that comes together with local authority presence, with police presence, senior police presence, to look at where are the areas where we're getting that combination of crime, ASB, and also other low-level issues. And we've done operations recently together through that problem-solving group and I won't give the exact location, but not far from Ilford Town Centre, where we've been able to do police enforcement, arrest people, do proactive warrants, take drugs off the street and drug dealers, at the same time as working with the council to do cleaning up some of the area, improving some of the lighting, looking at the CCTV, and how we jointly make an area better with the local authority. That join up exists, and we're seeing some really good joint work with the local authority and the police to look at areas that are suffering from those combined things, which you rightly say, fuel crime and also the fear of crime.
Okay, I want to just follow up on a couple more questions about this kind of local area issue, which are kind of perhaps, spoils the everyday life that people go through. So something I just wanted to pick up on is it's that stuff about things like dropping rubbish from your car. So there's a question here: what steps can be taken to try to combat the epidemic of takeaway rubbish being dumped from cars all around the residential streets of the borough? And I'm probably going to come to you, Cam, on this one. Again, it's kind of how can we do stuff to get residents perhaps not to do this, or what can we do to tackle it when it does happen?
Oh, I know that's really frustrating for a lot of people, and because there's a perception of what else is going on there. There are other things also going on with the parked cars. It's not just takeaways. It's sometimes people are taking drugs, or the canisters that we see on the streets, or even and even drinking as well, because you see the empty bottles. And I think there's a crossover there between people just sitting and having conversation in a car and potentially breaking the law, because if they're drinking, then there's a potential there for drink driving, if they're taking drugs similarly. And what we're trying to do is I think it's two-pronged. One is there are limited resources about, obviously, Stuart and ourselves, but we are doing patrols in these areas where we know, again, they're being reported. So if you're reporting things, they create hotspots, and it means then officers can then decide to say, we're going to put some resource into that this week or into that area. So that's one part of it. And I think the other part is that we're trying to push back as well to residents to say that if they're, because the people who are doing this, the people who are sitting in our cars having those takeaways, are our neighbours one way or another. They're people locally, and we're looking at all different avenues. So it might be that if we get the number plates of cars, it might not necessarily result in an arrest, but it might mean that there are letters being sent to the owner to say that your car was found your car was in this area parked here, and it's about just triggering that kind of conversation in that household or wherever that car is registered to say that there is an issue with the way that that car was either being parked or being used that day. So there's a variety of different tools we're using, but I think it's also about saying back to our neighbours as well that if you're in this borough, respect it. If you live here, take your rubbish away with you, and we're putting that messaging out everywhere as well.
So I just want to make a point, and I think what will come through the conversation here is there might be things that we can genuinely follow up on. So I think, Leader, we'll take that as an action that we can pursue. I want to get into a specific area now, and this one is for you, Stuart. It's quite a long question, but let me read it out. What is your plan to combat the deteriorating crime situation at and around Gants Hill Tube Station? Things are getting worse, not better, and local residents have given up on reporting issues to the police. What additional resourcing are you putting into Gants Hill, and when can residents of Gants Hill expect to see a more visible presence there and offenders behind bars?
So it is an area of concern for us, and it's an area where we've had police operations running since March last year. So there hasn't been a lack of response. I think I will take the challenge that says the response has not met the demand potentially, and that we've got a lot more work to do. But it's not an area that we've ignored, and we have had a number of joint police operations in that area. We have an almost permanent ongoing police operation led by one of my inspectors in that area to look at robbery, sexual offences, violence, fear of crime, public order offences. And we've done joint operations to try and bring additional police resources, not from my local command, but from BTP, TfL, Safer Transport Teams, all of which are additional officers that tend to work around transport hubs, to do joint police operations with us. And we've made a number of arrests. We've identified some criminals that we know are prolific in that area. We've done drugs warrants in that area and uncovered some organised criminality. And it is disappointing for me that doesn't translate into a different feel for those people that live in the Gants Hill area. So I think part of the challenge for us is how do we engage the community, and we've touched on some of it already, to have a conversation about the things that you're seeing that are leading you to those conclusions, and how we can then get that information and respond to it. So we think we might be doing the right thing based on what we're being told. And I would urge whoever's the author of that to not give up. We will have a local ward panel that you will be able to go and speak to your local police team and express those concerns, and to a degree apply some scrutiny to the local police teams that work that area, or support. But it's not something that we have ignored. We have an ongoing police operation there that's led by one of my inspectors, and we are trying our very, very best. And there are a few small satellite areas of, we've got the main town centre where we have an enhanced police presence. I don't have a huge amount more flexible resources to direct at other parts of each of the three boroughs that I'm responsible for. So we'll continue to focus on it. We'll continue to try and make it a safer, nicer area. I've done a couple of walkarounds there myself at different times and patrolled. So noted, and thanks for the feedback.
Okay.
We should try to improve.
I want to push you just a little bit, because when we identify an area that needs resources, we always talk about you trying to maneuver and kind of move things around. So if we came to you and went, Gants Hill is absolutely a priority, how do you respond to what?
Well, it already is a priority, hence we've got a policing operation there. It's one of about 4 areas where we've got an almost permanent policing operation, where my local leaders, Cllr, McCarthy, and the senior leaders here in Redbridge will be trying to pull together resources. But it is choice, and we need to be forensic about those choices. So police resources are under pressure. We don't have any more coming through to deploy. We are resourced in Redbridge no differently to the rest of London. In fact, we've got more cops because many parts of London don't have a town centre team. So the fact we've got a town centre team, there's only 19 of them in the whole of London. So there's an additional offer that the Met Police is putting additional resources into this area. We will flex resources and we'll push them around, but it needs to be based on where we think the problems are. And of course, if it's not being reported to us, it won't get factored into that conversation. I do a meeting once a month where I look at every crime that's happening across the BCU, and I look at where we look to deploy resources and what operations we set up. That's based on reported crime and intelligence. So please keep reporting it. Please keep holding us under that kind of scrutiny.
Yeah.
But we're not ignoring that problem. We don't have the resources to police every problem. We have to make choices. But at the moment, we are prioritising Gants Hill as an area of concern.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Because I want to come to you, Cam, on the next question. And just to let colleagues know, we're getting lots of questions in, and I want to try and get through as many as possible. So I will move it on now to the next bit. Cam, when I walk in from the car park in the morning, and I will see people sleeping rough, and I will see them outside on the street. So what are we doing to address that issue? How are we making a difference with that issue around rough sleeping in the borough?
I mean, rough sleeping is a challenge. It's something that we've worked on. We have brought it down. We are actively working on rough sleeping and bringing the numbers down. I think that the challenge really is that even there are many times when our officers will go and approach people and speak to them and try and bring them in, and they don't want to come in. That's the challenge. And there's often you'll see somebody. Our officers will know every rough sleeper pretty much in the borough. And the challenge always is how to bring them in, because they don't always want to come in. There are other elements in play here, sometimes substance abuse or mental health issues, but you cannot force somebody to come inside. There's another aspect that we've got in our borough, which is that we have a number of people who are rough sleeping who are deemed to have no recourse to public funds. So effectively what that means is that unless it's severe weather, the council is not allowed to spend money to house those people because of their immigration status. So there is a huge challenge. We have done some work over this in the last few years, notably that we've got 42 beds in Project Malachi. So we've set up a partnership with the Salvation Army in Ilford, and there are 42 beds there that are dedicated to being used for those who are rough sleeping. So still keep telling us about them. Our officers will know pretty much who everybody is. And they do safety checks, and they do checks on them, on their well-being as well. And even we'll all go out as well throughout the year and make sure we can approach each one of them and count and see how many we've got in the borough, and again speak to them. And there are a number of charities locally as well that help to give them food and clothing as well. But it is a challenge, because if somebody doesn't want their help, we'll keep asking, and there'll be a time they'll say yes, but there are times that they'll say no as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Stuart, how does the rough sleeping impact you? And is it around hotspots like Ilford, or is it something you're seeing wider?
Yeah, it's certainly an issue that gets reported to us, and it does have some correlation with crime as well, particularly where it's associated with begging activity, or so we get some aggressive begging activity as well. And where we get those reports, we will take action and do some joint work, which we have done with the local authority. And there is an undercurrent as well in that community of drug use as well, which again we've talked about. So it's definitely something that we would like to influence more than we do at the moment, but it is incredibly difficult because for some of the reasons that Cam's outlined there, and then also just from a police enforcement perspective, there is a sort of diminished level of options for people that have very few recourse to funds, and of course the courts will view that with a degree of sympathy. So in terms of enforcement, the options are really tricky, and there's also some really challenging social issues of mental health, substance addiction, health problems, and other safeguarding matters that need to be considered. So it is definitely a partnership issue. We'd like to support the local authority as best we can around that issue, but our options in dealing with homelessness are pretty limited, and it's primarily not a policing responsibility. Where there is associated antisocial behaviour, crime, or disorder, we absolutely have a responsibility to help tackle it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Right. I want to come on to a very specific crime, which is come up in a number of questions now. So I'm going to start with yourself, Stuart, on this one. Phone snatching has become alarmingly common in Redbridge, with many residents feeling unsafe, even in busy areas. Why does it seem that this issue isn't a priority for the council or police? And what specific actions are being taken to deter offenders, such as undercover operations or stricter penalties?
Yeah, so it's a slightly increased issue for us. So it's never not been a problem. Phone snatches have always been an issue. I'm not aware of any reported significant increase in that crime type. So I'm not aware of that, and it might be something that we can follow up and I can check. But I look at the theft other category that I shared on your screen earlier, and the majority of theft others are stealth thefts of pickpocketing or crimes of theft that don't involve snatching the phone out of somebody's hand. But it still happens, and it happens to a larger degree in other parts of London, some significant increases. So we don't want that to take hold here. And I am mindful that we are really clear that if that problem does start to emerge. So we do operations, and we've done some undercover work in the town centre recently where we've made, in over 2 days, we've arrested 4 individuals for this type of crime. And that was just before Christmas. And that was a bit of plainclothes patrol and a bit of observation of what was going on. And yes, there's pickpocketing there as well. And we got somebody sentenced to 12 weeks in prison and deported after their sentence for this crime type in the town centre. So we do targeted operations. It's quite resource intensive to prevent because it's such a kind of hard to predict crime. So you say it's become increasingly a problem. Please, again, make sure your people are reporting it. We will collate that information, and I'll ask my senior leaders to look at that particular problem because it's not on my radar as a significant increase at the moment. I may be mistaken, but that's my understanding.
Okay, and I think what was important at the beginning of the session is hearing some of the stats that you gave and being able to allocate and target the key issues that come up, but also it's been responsive, isn't it, to how people feel about their area. I want to come on to another particular type of crime, and I'm going to come to you, Leader. It's a minor crime compared to what's been discussed among some of the other questions. I'm reading this bit out, but fly tipping is a crime. Will the council do more to educate people? It gets reported and removed, and within days happens again. Some people I spoke to about it say they didn't know it was a crime to leave unwanted items out on the street.
It has always been thanks for the question. It has always been a bit of a carrot and stick conversation around fly tipping. But I think ultimately we're putting out messaging, and we have been putting out messaging for quite a while now around the work we're doing, and things like the wall of shame that we put up to help identify people. And I think there is an education piece. We are doing a lot of work around making sure people understand that there's no need to fly tip. You shouldn't be fly tipping. Waste is collected. We have 2 recycling centres that you can take your waste to for free of charge if you're in the borough. So there is an element of making sure that we continue with the education piece, but we're also doing what we can around enforcement. So where there are hotspots, where there are places we know regularly people are dumping, we will trial cameras. We'll put cameras in that space for a while to see if we can capture people, and we do issue fines, and we are trying to advertise that as much as the education part. We're also showing that we are catching people who are using our streets as places to dump their unwanted goods. So it's important that we get that message across, and I think everyone that can share that, the better. We were talking earlier on about communication, and I think one of the things that I would urge local residents to use is to get the Redbridge WhatsApp channel as well, because you get lots of information on there. And the other part as well is that Stuart and I talk about this as well, but it's about making sure the successes that Stuart's team have are relayed to local residents. We need to get that information out as much as possible, because that will give them the confidence to report crime. Because often, as we said earlier, there might be times when something's reported and we're not seeing a result on that there and then, but over time you're seeing a result because of the work that's happening. But that information needs to come back to residents so they get the confidence to keep reporting.
Okay, that's great. I want to come to Stuart first on the next question, which is what are the police and council doing about drinking on the streets and begging? So it's kind of 2 questions in one, but Stuart, over to you.
Yeah, so I think with I've touched on the begging question when we talked about homelessness, which often we see as an associated issue. And whilst it is technically against the law to beg in public, we would prioritise our response for those that are doing it aggressively or doing it in a harassing way. And certainly, I think it's our duty to get involved at that point. The other thing I'd say about begging is please do not give money to people that are begging, because almost without question, the money is not going to pay for accommodation. It's not going to pay for food. It's going to pay for probably drugs. And that's the reality. It's not helping that person. It's not kind. there is access to accommodation, there is access to those kinds of services free of charge if that individual were to wish to have it. And I think part of our job when we do our joint work around homelessness is to make sure we try and get people into those places where they can accept help, and we can give them a home or give them a roof or give them some kind of place to stay and food. So I think that's important when we look at begging. And when it comes to street drinking, yes, often it's associated with ASB. It comes down to that whole kind of, what does a place look and feel like? Even the fly tipping issue or the littering issue. If we've got a place that looks and feels lawless, it will feel lawless, and people will associate it with a place that doesn't feel safe. So we are interested in those types of behaviours like street drinking and begging, and even fly tipping and littering, if it adds up to making a place feel lawless, because we always then see associated rise in other crimes. More serious crimes will come with that. So that is why we do the work that I described earlier, to do joint problem solving, not just tackle the crime. Let's have a look at the environment. And so we will take those reports seriously, but we don't have the capacity to launch real significant police operations around things like street drinking and begging.
Okay, I'm gonna come to Cam on this one as well, because it's not just the street drinkers, it's where they get the drink from. So, leader, what can we do about that issue?
So, I mean, I know there have always been questions around some of our licensing, some of the work that happens in the borough, and I think that there's a piece there for us as well, and a piece of work for us to be doing around licensing and understanding where people are buying their alcohol, especially late in the evening, and whether that's adhering to licensing hours and times. And I think there's some work there for us to do as a council. I think we have public space protection orders across the borough as well, so it means our officers are proactively making sure that we challenge anybody who is street drinking. So that work is happening. I think when we go back to the begging, everybody can help by just not giving them any money. If we all stopped giving them money, the begging will stop tomorrow. There are lots and lots, and I know it's hard to do because we all have a heart. We'll see somebody in need, and it's especially when it's a bad day, you feel like giving them some money. But there are lots and lots of support agencies in the borough to help people who have nothing, who need a meal, who need food, and we can redirect them to that. Our officers will do that work as well when we know about them as well. So I would say that on begging, just do not give them any money, and then we'll see that drastically reduce in Redbridge.
Great stuff. All right, I'm going to keep rattling through the questions because they're coming in fast. So so if I cut you off, don't be surprised.
Please do.
I want to. We've talked quite a bit about reporting. I want to pick up the idea of the ward safer neighbourhood. Is there an expectation, Stuart, that kind of the ward councillors try as far as possible to join the ward safer neighbourhood police teams at their ward panel meetings with local residents?
Yeah, we would really encourage that. So the role of there's a really crucial link up between the elected local officials and the police, because ultimately we're both there to serve the public, and ward councillors have a wealth of information about what people are telling them locally. And the same reason I meet with Cam.
I'm going to cut in.
Go.
Can you just explain a little bit about what a ward panel meeting is?
So a ward panel meeting is a place where our police officers will probably 3 or 4 times a year meet with local residents in the ward in which they police. Those panels are designed to discuss local problems, share police crime data at ward level, and also to look at setting priorities. So what are the agreed community priorities for your local police team? You do have a say. People that live in your area are attending these meetings and are shaping the priorities and the conversation about what our police officers do. We would encourage councillors to attend that, to share the information. Whilst not making decisions or deploying police resources, they certainly can share the information. And we would ask, and I think part of my ask will be that tomorrow we publish some information on how to join the panels and where they are and how people can get involved in that process. But we want more people involved in that, so we can demonstrate to communities that we will listen and respond to your concerns at ward level. And also you get to know your police officers, which again was raised earlier.
Okay, great stuff. Right, I'm going to come to yourself, Cam, on this one. What can the council or the police, but we'll come to you, Cam, do about aggressive illegal e-bikes on the pavement? And I know we've talked about this down at Ilford Lane as an example. So what can we do?
I think it's like the question you posed today, Julian, because we were talking about this earlier this week. we're looking at being actively enforcing and doing whatever we need to do to stop these e-bikes travelling on our streets. I've asked, well, Julian's here, but I've asked Julian and the enforcement team to put together a program in which we can find them, if we need to confiscate them, do whatever we need to do to get them off of our pavements. They are heavy, they ride really quickly, and they will cause someone a serious injury. So there will be some serious work being done to really curb the use of those e-bikes, particularly on our pavements. People might find that their deliveries aren't going to get on there on time, because I've asked and tasked all of our officers now to find a way in which we can stop that, because they're dangerous.
It's really helpful, thank you. I'm going to come to a particular place again. I'm going to talk about Barkingside. So Stuart, since the closure of Barkingside Police Station, residents have had to bear the brunt when it comes to crime. What is happening in regards to the station? Is it still operational, and to what extent?
So it's a fully operational police station. So we have police resources in there, including local neighbourhood policing teams who police the local area. So some of the ward-based safer neighbourhood teams who hold the ward panels work at that location, police their communities. All of our teams are close to their wards. We also have other police officers in there as well. So I have a significant amount of my proactive criminal investigation officers in there that launch proactive police operations. So it is a busy, active police station. We don't have a front counter, I think, is the point that's being raised there. Every single borough in London is only commissioned to have one 24/7 front counter, which is a mayoral MOPAC decision, and that's part of our estate strategy that I can't really influence locally. And I do accept that people want a local police station, but at the moment that is Ilford. But we do have local policing teams at Barkingside who you can engage with and report crimes to and go to the ward panels for, and get involved in that conversation. And they are policing the local community. I'm not aware of a particular reported crime increase, but we know that not all crime is reported. But whoever the author of that question is, tomorrow when we publish the answers, we'll put some more information on there about how to contact your teams in that area.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And I think that notion of policing in the community is really important. I do know, as an officer, there's been a lot of work recently between ourselves and the police around what we're trying to do at Orchard House. I'm not going to give the detail. I'm going to ask you, Cam, to kind of just explain a bit more about what's happening over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have a sense of reassurance when you have a police station. It's not particularly productive for us to have one necessarily, in terms of having the police there waiting for us to come over to them. But I think it's important that the police have bases in the borough to work out of. So we have the main station in Ilford, then we've got Barkingside, as Stuart just spoke about. But we have a gap in the north and the west of the borough. So it's why we've worked with the Met Police to bring a hub into the Orchard Estate. It's to all intents and purposes a police station, a place for the officers to start and end their days, to be there during the day as well at times. So that will be coming online very soon, in a matter of weeks. It's a frustration for myself and for Stuart for how long it's taken, but these are matters that are outside of our hands for both of us. We've handed the building over. Stuart said yes to having the police hub, and then we've left this to the powers that be to make sure that everything that's supposed to be in there will be in there. The important thing is that police hub will be here in a matter of weeks, and then we'll have bases for our police throughout our borough, from the south, the north, and the northwest of Redbridge as well.
I just want to add that this is quite unique, what's happening here, and I think it's a really good piece of work. And I think hopefully what you're hearing this evening is that it isn't a matter of the police doing it or the council doing it. It's about partnership all the way through. So I think it's really important. I want to finish. We're going to try and go till about 5:02, and then I'm going to give you a couple of minutes each just to round up to close the session. So you've got about 5 more minutes. I want to deal with a difficult issue, a really, really important issue, and this is VAUG. And this is about violence against women and girls. And I'm going to start with yourself, Stuart. What are the police doing? Well, let's think about this partnership, but what is the police doing to help tackle violence against women and girls and to ensure the safety of all women and girls in our borough?
Thank you. It remains my number one priority. In terms of VAUG, is a crime type that affects so many women in so many ways. So there's a whole range of crime types that includes domestic abuse, which happens primarily in behind closed doors, which we know is huge and underreported and affects women disproportionately, and in a way that leads to great harm, all the way through to sort of the what we sometimes call lower level, but I don't think it is lower level street-based harassment and those kind of things. So we've identified for some time now, this is a significant priority area jointly for us in the local authority and the police. We have the This Has to Stop campaign in the town centre with a really strongly connected comms campaign and an enforcement campaign that we've done jointly to target the men who are behaving in the way that is criminal and is making the place feel unsafe for women. We've been issuing enforcement notices, making arrests, and we've had some significant progress in terms of our engagement with women. So we do a whole range of different engagements with women, safe to space, walk and talk, safe to talk, a whole range of initiatives that we've opened the door to have engagements with women locally to ask, why do you feel unsafe here? What can we do about that? And that is a joint conversation we're having with partners. How can we improve the environment? How can we police it better? Who are the men that are behaving in this way? And how can we target them? And that's ultimately one of our priorities. So there is a whole range of activities I could list off now, but probably don't have time. But it remains my number one priority because it affects so many people in so many ways.
And I want to ask the same question to yourself, Leader.
I mean, just like Stuart, this has been a priority for us. And if anyone's been looking at what the council has been focused on the last couple of years, it has been our This Has to Stop campaign. The truth is that more women are in danger in their own homes than they are on the streets. But it's important that we keep our streets safe, and that we've had women's safety walks where we've taken women across the borough to walk across different parts of the borough and explain what they see as areas of unsafe areas that they feel that they can't walk into. So that's important that we do that. We became the first local authority in London to issue a fixed penalty notice for a man who was harassing a woman in the street. We use our public space protection orders to prevent catcalling and harassment. And we're running campaigns across different demographics, different age groups. So we've got mentors, we've got youth leaders working as part of this as well to help talk about not being bystanders, about every one of us not being a bystander when we see somebody being harassed or in danger or feeling uncomfortable. There are elements and things that we can all do to make that person feel safer, to give them the support they need as well. So there's a number of things that we're doing on this. It's never ending because this is a challenge that keeps changing and evolving throughout time. But it's important that we put it as a top priority for us.
And just to reiterate that point about it being a top priority, we actually have a team within the council called Reach Out, and they are absolutely dedicated to this issue full time, and they're kind of nationally leading in what they're doing, which is unfortunate that we need it, but they are actually doing incredible work, and I've got to thank them for that work. We're down to the last minute or so. There's just one I wanted to pick up. I won't be able to cover everything, I'm sorry everyone, but there's one about schools here, which is tackling kind of youth being groomed into gangs outside of schools and on our high streets. And I just wanted to understand, what's your work with schools, Stuart, just about how we look after them and make sure the safety of our students and staff are paramount?
Yeah, so that sits under our neighbourhood policing strand, and we do significant engagement with all the schools, one way or another, in the borough. We have schools officers that are currently, we're reprofiling their role to give them a broader remit outside of the school environment, to bring them into those places where we know school children are occupying. And we know that there are vulnerabilities there. So you're kind of after school gathering places, public spaces where we know school children are frequenting, and also other organisations that deal with young people where we've perhaps not offered an equitable kind of policing response across all young people. So we're taking some of our schools officers out of the dedicated schools role and giving them a much broader youth engagement remit, which is pretty much happening over the next few weeks. It will give my Safer Neighbourhoods team more resource and allow us to have a much more team approach to young people, rather than just relying on the schools officer to pick up that piece of work. So the benefits there for us are that we should hopefully have the ability to respond to stuff outside of school perhaps more adequately than we've been able to do previously. But we do recognise that the school environment is a critical one that we need to be supporting. The schools have the responsibility to safeguard their pupils. Where crimes or vulnerabilities are identified, we will go in and investigate, and we rely on the schools to share that information with us. So I think moving forward, we'll have a much broader approach to youth engagement on the borough.
Yeah, and I've got to say, as someone who works here, I just know how good our schools are across the borough. So obviously we work really closely with them. So Cam, I'm just going to let you do a quick roundup on the school side of it, and then I'm going to move to the final part of it. So,
yeah, I mean, thank you, Stuart and Julian. Our officers in children's education are constantly in touch with our heads of all of our schools, so they're always getting information back and also imparting information as well. We're running programs in our schools. We're talking about healthy relationships, about grooming, having those conversations, and running workshops throughout our schools, so that there's a message getting across around where you can go, what's healthy, where you can get support from. So this is a constant battle, because I think that there's online grooming that we need to challenge. It's not always just a face-to-face and what's happening in the classroom. And I think it's something that we all need to play a part in. It's all of us knowing what our children and the young people that we know are accessing, who they're speaking to, and also understanding that we get that message across in schools, so that young people know where they can go for help.
brilliant. Okay, right. So just to let everyone know, there will be a recording of this session that will be available, that we'll pick up every kind of question that's come in. I'm sorry I couldn't get through everything, and I can see some questions, for instance, about local businesses and so on. So we'll make sure everything is picked up and answered. What I'd like to do, what you've heard is obviously about on the street issues, you've heard about specific places, you've heard about some of the tough issues that colleagues are trying to address. So Stuart, I'm going to ask you to do a roundup. I'm going to give you just over a minute, I'm afraid.
Fine. And
And then I'm going to go to you, Leader, and do the same, and then we're going to wrap up everybody. Okay, Stuart, over to you.
thank you. Just first of all, thank you for everyone that's asked questions. Either those that have been unanswered, we'll hopefully pick them up. I think the headline for me is that we need to give you the information that you need to get more involved in your local policing. So I think what I'll be asking my team to do in the kind of response to some of those questions when we actually publish this is to put on there information about how to contact and access your local team, who they are and what their contact details are, where they operate, how we can promote and give you the information to become involved in the ward panels that exist in each of the wards in the borough, a reminder how to report crime and ASB and how to share intelligence and information with us. We can't police effectively if you don't do that. We need to know what's going on. Even if that feels futile, we need that information. We can then do policing operations to catch the individuals that do it. And I think we'll also want to post some information just on how to get involved in some of our VORG initiatives, particularly the walk and talk and do stuff, which I think we would like more people to get involved in. But other than that, thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to answer the questions.
Thank you, Stuart. And Cam, over to you to round up for us.
Thanks, Julian, and thank you, Stuart, for coming today. Yeah, thank you to everybody for joining today and taking part. I know that there's lots of questions that haven't been answered because we haven't got the time, but we'll make sure that the answers are put online afterwards to all the questions, and we'll be having other sessions as well. This won't be the only one we're having. I'm really proud that we've invested in things like Park Guard, ANPR cameras across the borough, our Community Protection Task Force, and we've upgraded our CCTV. We have some, people will ask me for more CCTV, but we're one of the most CCTV boroughs in London. And we're also looking at all of our enforcement teams and seeing how we can give them more teeth, give them more powers, give them more responsibilities as well, so they can have a look at other aspects of enforcement across the borough when they're out and about. We need everyone's help. This, to solve and to reduce crime in our borough and to make everybody feel that much safer. We need everybody involved. It's the police, obviously. They have the powers. It's the council to support them, and it's every resident, each one of us who lives in the borough, like myself. That needs to be involved, needs to report things. I know it's frustrating. I know sometimes it feels like something is not getting done, but the important thing is to keep reporting, because I know that we need to improve in communications. That's been clear, I think, today, that people don't feel that they're getting the information back, and I think there's some work there for all of us to do around getting information out there about successes and sharing success. I know recently, and we were talking about this, that we're looking at facial recognition cameras that have been deployed in the borough, and they have caught people that have committed crimes in the past, not necessarily even in Redbridge, but those cameras immediately led to arrests in the borough. So it's important that even if somebody is not caught today, someone's not apprehended, that work is there and that information is out there. So I'm still going to ask everybody, keep reporting online, keep using Report It. We know we don't get everything right. Stuart will be the first to admit that, as I will. But the important thing is there's a passion here to keep our borough safe, to make the streets safer. So help us by reporting it, and make sure. And that logs a request. That means that something has to be done. A response will come from that. So please do that. Engage your councillors, engage your ward panel teams, and your ward teams that you've got in each and every ward across the borough.
So thank you, everybody, and have a safe evening. And we're going to close the session there. All right. Thank you.